Welcome to the Cloud Fabric's knowledge sessions. We are in the week 3. Like always, we will pick an outcome and show how AIOps solution will help us deliver that one. And this is more of the way it is structured is more of a knowledge session, which means what capabilities you should look for, how AIOps solution will address this. Today we'll be talking about how AIOps can help mitigate the risks coming from end of life, end of security, or contracts, or your internal compliances, as well as how do you reduce the cost by automating the compliances or identifying some new cost-saving opportunities. Though it's not as glamorous as the other 2 sessions we talked about, but this, like all humble things in the world, this is delivers some real dollar savings and help provide a lot of efficiency for IT planning and governance people. Like all the other sessions, the way we structure is we will walk through the solutions, and also talk about the capabilities that are essential to achieve this outcome. And then we'll have a demo for 5 to 10 minutes, and if time permits, we will address any Q&A that gets posted, right? So just brief about the Cloud Fabrics. We are an AIOps solution provider, and like all AIOps solutions and platform, so we try to address, the platform and solution addresses different outcomes for various stakeholders, because it's an algorithmic based solution rather than a rules based, which traditionally a lot of IT solutions rely on. So this can scale at a much bigger level, and that's why AIOps being seen as is gaining a lot of popularity and is able to address different use cases. And the way we approach it, Cloud Fabrics has approached, and is probably one of the vendors that have seen the value of asset intelligence, built-in asset intelligence and outcomes. And now a lot of vendors and analysts start to see it. And today's outcome is more surrounding about how an asset intelligence will help address this outcome. And we will get into details on what the asset intelligence is, and also what are the capabilities you should be looking at. So if you look at asset intelligence, right, the context of asset intelligence is also changing quite a bit. It's driven from some of the market drivers, like people are starting to look at, like similar to cloud, vendors like HPs and Cisco's of the world are starting to offer their hardware in a subscription model or a consumption-based model. So which means you need to know how your asset usage is, usage patterns and baselines. So definitely the traditional way of looking asset intelligence is evolving. Traditionally, if you have CMDBs, you typically have some inventory details. It's IP address, name, host names, and the location, owner, that kind of details. And if you're lucky, you will also have some dependency detail. But beyond that, you don't have it. But today's need of asset intelligence is much bigger, and it requires you to look at, like, what is my life cycle, the risk coming from life cycle, both from an external or internal point of view, and also the compliance, governance. People are having a lot of governance needs, either to manage the regulatory things or because to have security, they have, like, what versions they have to maintain. So different needs of the asset is evolving. And similarly, utilization, like what I told about, like, if I have to go into consumption models, I need to track the usage pattern so I can make some decisions on which of my assets is better off going with a CapEx model versus an OpEx model. So without having that details, it's very difficult decision. And also, like, performance and utilization life cycle. So we'll talk about how the evolution of the asset intelligence is coming, and how you can achieve that in this new world. So asset intelligence, again, why is it so complex, right? The data is different, and this is a circle that is coming from Gartner. So the data, the asset intelligence resides in multiple places, whether it is from your CMDB, or it could be from your monitoring tools, Some things could be coming from monitoring tools. Like remember the 360-degree things that we talked about. So if you have to really get all the details, you need to tap into different data sources, and it's not in one place. And there's no single source of truth for getting all this information. You need to look for in like CMDB or NetFlow data, monitoring tools, so ITSM tool. So you might have to pull information from all these things to provide a 360-degree asset intelligence. And also the big challenge is, more and more we talk from customers, though they have implemented CMDB in one way or other, oftentimes is broken or incomplete and out of date. So how do we make sure that, if I have to rely on CMDB, how do I make sure it's up to date and it has all the relevant information? Though you have CMDB, you need to make sure, it's up to date. And again, who needs it? Now I talked about what does 360-degree asset intelligence is. Now we'll talk about who all needs it. And today we'll be focusing on asset lifecycle management use cases. The last two sessions we covered how asset intelligence helps in some of the AIOps use cases like alert noise reduction or incident room. And in the future sessions, we'll talk about how this thing will be used to accelerate your transformation initiatives. But today we'll be talking primarily on few use cases like life cycle events like end of life, end of support, the contract, as well as the versions. Like if you have some internal policy, compliance, governance, how do I make sure I stay up to date on internal versions? And how do I automate those things, as well as how do I track my utilization so I can achieve some cost savings, as well as both from a contract point of view or reallocation of this resources. We'll be covering those things. Again, the same concept can be used for a lot of other use cases, but I wanted to tell how the AIOps and the capabilities you require to address these concepts, but the same concepts can be used for other use cases. For example, if I have to any vulnerabilities that I get notified from the vendor, how do I do that? But it's very similar capabilities you will be looking for. So what are the building blocks? Right? If you look at the first starting point, again, these are the capabilities that you need to look for in your AIOps solution, and we will be digging deep into each of these things in the subsequent slides. The first and foremost is ability to collect data in an automated way. If you have a CMDB, that's great, but if not, you should be able to, the solution should have the ability to go and collect all the deep details, the 360-degree view of the asset directly from either using the APIs, SNMPs, or different protocols. Go and do it. And so you should be able to collect it, and or sometimes you may have in different files. So once you have that asset details, now you need to start overlaying with the lifecycle information. And the lifecycle information could be coming from various sources. It could be coming from external sources, could be like vendor, like for example SNTC or some HP, Juniper. They all provides an API where they will tell what assets you have procured, what support level you have, any known bugs, issues, or if there is any end of life, end of support for any of the model numbers you have. So you have all these things available directly from the vendor. And other thing is internal sources, like for example compliance. Oftentimes, especially if you have if you are working in a regulatory environment, you have certain policies saying that I need to always maintain it NN-1 policies. Very commonly we are seeing from our customers, they have these NN-1 policies that need to be maintained. Once you overlay that information, then how do I automate that one? How do I combine these two things to provide the insights that are required to manage my life cycle, whether it is to upgrade or to take some actions, right? And also to automate it, like if it's coming from a batch file, how do I do it periodically, and how do I pull this information from the vendors, so and provide these reports on a regular basis? Because today, when we're talking to the partners, a lot of these things are manual and they rely on people, and which costs real dollars. And that is where the whole cost savings would come in. People rely on these things to collect data from multiple sources, put together as reports for the management to take this action. So how do we automate that one? So having that capability, these 4 key building blocks are essential to drive this outcome. So as we said, like the first thing is, a combination of CMDB and your own data collection is very important, because most of the cases you have the CMDB outdated or partial. So you need to complement that with your own data collection capabilities. It's preferable to have agentless and also has to be dynamic, which means continuously, because things change constantly in network. Because IT is very dynamic in nature, so you need to make sure you have the capabilities to do it, this collection in a periodic way. And it has to support multiple protocols, because if you look at the different aspects of the asset intelligence we touched upon earlier, so you need to have the ability to collect using multiple protocols and feed that information using into your AIOps platform. This is like just a sample, and also important is ability to slice and dice the data by location, by type. So depending upon how you wanted to see the data, very important to run these insights and reports with various filters. So that's important, and we will cover all these things in the demo. The next is, once I have this data, like I have the asset inventory, I have the topology information. Now I need to have ability to automatically collect lifecycle data. As we discussed, lifecycle data should be coming from customers, or like OEMs, the vendors a lot of vendors have APIs today. So your platform should have ability to pull this data automatically and overlay with the asset details, and also sometimes it may have, like especially the procurement system might have ERP systems. You should have ability to integrate with into your ERP system, both for procurement data as well as for contract data. And also, from subscription service, people like some of the things are subscription based, like especially the software and some of the hardware. You should have ability to track and monitor the usage for the subscription as well as your deployed assets. So to help decisions like whether I have to go with the CapEx model or OpEx model, I need to be able to track that. And other sources like CVEs or Excel files, dictionaries, vendor proprietary dictionaries. So we have seen a lot of vendors providing in some Excel files, or customers or partners. Sometimes partners also maintain this information in some Excel files. So you need to have the ability, the solution should have the ability to take these things on a regular basis. And typically they keep these files up to date. So you should have a ability to run these in batches, like a 15 days or a 1 month, depending upon how often these things changes. Your platform should be able to ingest this and process it. And this is like, and we will talk about the 3 use cases we talked about, right? Version compliance as very often seen use case, in especially with highly regulated like healthcare and financial. This costs a lot of time and effort, and sometimes it could be out of date. Typically we have seen references every month. Management executive wants to see this report, and they spend at least 2 to 3 days before that to collect the data from various places. So it's and with few man hours and weeks they have to spend, depending upon the complexity. So we have seen how you can automate that by pulling this information from various sources and having that capabilities. And the second thing is the end of life, end of support. Huge risk, and for especially large customers with very distributed, and also the partners who manage multiple vendors and multiple customers. This is a very big cost item, and so having ability to view a month in advance or a quarter in advance or a 6 months in advance, and the ability to take some mitigation actions is a huge, both from risk point of view and also from cost point of view. You should be able to have this visibility is a very important use case, and we will see in the demo. And the other thing is the contract, right? Again, both from a risk point of view, compliance point of view, but also it should be able to provide insights on what kind of savings you should be able to get based by overlaying the usage and the deployment status. You should be able to save a lot of, and we will touch upon some of the use cases when we are doing the demo, how we could save real dollars. I mean, significant, though it's a simple insight, but having ability to say, like, is the asset deployed, is it used for production, or is it used for QA, and what kind of contract you have. So having, overlaying all this kind of data and providing an insight can give real dollar savings. We will see how it can do it. And then finally, as we said, right, people are looking at different business models, consumption models, not the CapEx, even though it's an on-prem. Cloud is pretty much in consumption model, but we are seeing in some of the markets, especially Western Europe and North American markets, people are wanting to adopt consumption-based models for their on-prem hardware also, not just for software. So people should have these details on how do I collect usage data, especially from network devices. We are seeing more and more. What ports usage is there? How many ports are used? What is my baseline on a weekly basis, monthly basis for various departments, various locations, so I can make some strategic decisions on whether I should go with CapEx or OpEx models. Not only that, if I have these usage patterns and visibility in my resource usage, I can also make some decisions on where I can reallocate these resources. And I will touch upon some of the real case studies we have seen and how it has helped our customers. Both from software, so you should have the ability to track usage at network, storage, compute, as well as the software, so you can make some decisions. And also this is useful for capacity planning. Your platform solution should have the ability to forecast for next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and also make some recommendation on whether you should go with consumption models or CapEx model. So with that, we will get into the demo, and the other more important thing is having all these insights and exposing it in the API is very important, and we have seen this very often in our customers because they have all these custom applications or other applications that require this data, whether it is the consumption models, because if they have to run some models, right, some advanced models on the consumption forecasting models, if they have their own forecasting models, you should have the ability to expose that in API is very, very important. Or if I have to run some compliance report on certain type of assets, having that ability to expose that, and people should be able to query this, your platform is very important. So again, just to highlight some of the key capabilities you should look for when you are evaluating your AIOps solutions. So with that, we will get into the demo. So we will cover these use cases. Again, version compliance, the contract status, utilization, as well as end of life. These are the 4 things we will cover in the demo. And I will touch upon how we have shared, the real case studies and what kind of savings we were able to deliver. So this is the Cloud Fabric's AIOps solution, and we will talk about the asset intelligence thing. So here we have 2 views. One is for the regular operations guys who makes day-to-day decisions, and then one is for the executive who wants to see how these things are progressing, whether what kind of compliance. So if time permits, we'll get into the executive, but we will cover the key items that we talked about from an operation or admin type person. So first is like what we talked about, right? Having ability to have a good view on the inventory, the complete inventory, with ability to slice and dice data into with using the various filters. So again, all the different by vendors, by product category, or the family, or so various things, very high level view, and with the ability to drill down into each of these things. Again, you can have further drill down by product categories. Again, so having all this these things is very important. Now, again, this is coming from both from CMDB as well as the own discovery, assetless discovery. So it goes and collects the data from using various protocols like we talked about, and also have various views, the same data, but by location also you should have. And again, ability to drill down into each of these things is very important. Also have the different filters, whether it is by the product type, the location, the families, the roles, regions. So it's very important. Again, I don't want to get into too details, but just to give a flavor for what type of things you need to look for, and having ability to generate different views and reports, right? So we'll get into the next thing. Now I have all the assets in place. Now we will be talking about the life cycle insights. So when we start with the life cycle, the first thing we talked about is the plan of record, which is also known as the version compliance. Again, to a lot of customers it's commonly need, mostly from governance or for meeting some external regulatory needs. People wanted to make sure that again, to do this one, they need to have the data from the vendors, what is the latest versions, and then compare with what is deployed inside the network. That means I should have the ability to integrate with the vendor systems, or if the partner is managing it, feed that information in an Excel file, and then comparing with what we have in the network. Imagine you have a lot of data centers distributed and different vendors, different equipment. This could take a lot of time and effort, and we have seen people spending recruiting people, like at least 2 to 3 people just to do these things on a regular basis. So imagine the amount of cost savings you can achieve by automating this whole process, like feeding getting the information from the vendor if they have APIs, or processing these things from the file and then producing these reports on a regular basis. Here we have both for hardware and software, what versions they have, and what is the current version from the vendor, latest version, and what is the version that is deployed at various locations, both from hardware and software. Again, having the ability to drill down and see, and there you can also submit a change request. Typically what we see is once they find non-compliant issues, they will submit a change request and then they track it, and this is where the whole executive report would come in, right? So, and then this is one common use case, hugely popular, and if you have an automation capability, it can save a lot of man hours. And it's also up to date. You don't have to doubt whether when the data was collected versus what you have. If let's say you collected the data about a week, and the vendor has released the new version, right? Things might be out of date. So making sure that you have the up-to-date data is very, very critical. So having that automation capabilities is very important. Other thing is end of life, end of support, hugely important, especially if you are relying on critical services on these assets. You need to have ability to see this thing in a quarter in advance or a year in advance, and see how many of them are coming end of life, where they are located, having that information from a dependency, what applications are depending on that, what servers are connected to that. Having all that information is very important, and we also have asset dependencies. You can go and check each of the asset, what are the connected servers, connected apps, application servers. You have all these details. Having these details is very important, so you can make some strategic decisions on, okay, do I have to replace or do I have to go and purchase additional and keep it in stock? So all kinds of decisions, typically you have to rely on when you are dealing with end of life, end of support. But today, a lot of managed services providers rely on these kind of insights, and we heard from people. Next is the contract. Like the things we talked about is the contracts. We have seen people saving a lot of time and effort. When we are talking with one large customer, they have done a very simple exercise where they have compared what they procured versus what they deployed, and then overlaid with what type of contract they have. And then they have identified at least 20 to 25% of their equipment which is sitting in their stores, but they are paying a premium support. So if you're just moving from a premium to regular support, gave them a lot of hundreds of thousands of dollars savings from just changing the contract type. So having that ability to compare with what procurement data from their ERP, and then going and checking what was deployed, and then overlaying with the current contract status directly coming from the vendor or their ERP system, you should be able to see what contracts are expiring when, and what type of equipment or have the contract, what type of contract. Again, having the ability to see different views is also very important, and then as we said, it can have a huge saving opportunities. So we covered from the life cycle, the version compliance and contracts, as well as the end of life support. Now we will look at the last use case we talked about is the utilization. Again, here in this case, one of the customers use this report, they have identified what zero port switches, which means switches that doesn't have any traffic for last 1 week or 1 month. So you have the ability to see what your baseline is, and then having identifying, classifying which are your zero port switches. So they are able to redeploy those switches into new facilities that they are deploying. I mean, this is in a company that they have to build new facilities to support. So they could identify quickly their zero port switches, and they could save a lot of time and effort. Similarly, we talked about the zero port switches, and we have seen how for software subscription, especially for subscription software, having this kind of usage patterns can help readjust the contracts or readjust their the subscription models, can give a lot of cost savings. Having ability to see where they are, again, by overlaying with the asset inventory, you should be able to get all these details, which will help you reallocate your resources, optimize the resources, and then achieve the cost savings. So with that, I complete the demo, and hopefully I covered the main things, we're starting with the asset discovery, having a very good detail of and complete view of your asset inventory, and then overlaying with the 3 key things: version compliance, plan of record, which is also known as plan of record, the contracts, end of life, end of support coming directly from vendors. All these things, ability to automate by integrating with the vendor system, and then finally tracking the utilization on a continuous basis, and baselining that, and labeling them by what type of usage patterns are seen, which of them are underutilized or not utilized, so you can redeploy those resources, which will give you real cost savings. So with that, we complete it, and thanks again for all of you, and we will see you next week.